Brandon Rhiness. I am a writer, director, producer, filmmaker. You might know me for my movies Hot Box and Grotesque, and I'm here to share my knowledge with you.
Brandon Rhiness, welcome back to the Make It podcast. It's been 2 years.
Yeah, been 2 incredibly fast years. It's I don't know if it's because of COVID or what, but the time just flew by.
And look at us. Better than ever. We made it.
Come so far.
We made it to the other side, Brandon. Me and you.
Still alive. It's I guess it's all it counts.
Yeah, I think in retrospect, it's like, hey, that's pretty cool, because right after we had our initial conversation in the fall of 2020, it released close to winter 2020, but we actually spoke in fall of 2020. We were in the throes of something we had no idea, the outcome of. We didn't necessarily know all the details. We still don't know all the details. We didn't know all the players. We still don't know all the players. Like,
at least now we know we're probably going to live through it. It's not, there's a light at the end of the tunnel versus back then. It was a little bit more uncertainty.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And so it is interesting to talk to you after all this time because, and this is me, like I haven't done the work I should have and we should be doing, just keeping tab. Well, we keep tabs on you. That's not true. We do keep tabs on you, but through IMDb Pro and other systems, but we haven't reached out to you like we should. So this really is a reunion in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Where there's going to be a lot of catching up. Just for the audience's sake, I'm not going to go through a lengthy bio, but I want them to get sort of refamiliarized with you. So I'm going to read just a short bio, and You're welcome to amend to it or correct it. Brandon Rhiness is a screenwriter and director from Edmonton, Canada. He also writes and publishes comic books and graphic novels through Higher Universe Comics, a company he co-founded. Brandon has written in various genres and mediums, including film, TV, reality, and web series. And you grew up in, now tell me if I'm pronouncing this right, Wetaskiwin? Wetaskiwin. Of course I missed it. Wetaskiwin, Alberta, and now lives in Edmonton. So I wasn't sure how we would start this conversation. I had a lot of things and a lot of places I could start with, but again, in the spirit of round 2, refamiliarization with the audience, can you just remind us of the story of selling your first screenplay?
Oh yeah, my first screenplay, John 3:16. I'd sold a few shorts up to that point. I actually sold quite a few like short scripts, but I'd written several features. One of them was John 3:16, the story about a guy who shows up at a mental institution and thinks he's Jesus. And as the story goes, it's kind of like maybe he is, maybe he isn't, and the other people, it turns out he's not. But some of the other people, think that he is, and he kind of inspires everyone. And it is a different kind of genre that I usually write. I write a lot of horror and that kind of thing, and a bit of comedy. This was like straight up drama. And I met a producer named Jarvis Greiner, who I'm still making films with to this day. He went to film school in LA and I just moved back to Edmonton, and he posted on Facebook that he was looking for scripts. So I sent him a few of my horrors, because at that point, John 3:16, it wasn't even finished. I had kind of like 90% finished, but it was too long and it wasn't very good. I'd basically given up on it. I'm like, I'll put it on the back burner and maybe one day I'll get around to finishing it. So I sent Jarvis some of my horror scripts, and he's like, I like your writing, but I'm not a horror guy. Like, do you have anything else? And I kind of I didn't want to say no, so I reluctantly told him about John 3:16. He's like, oh yeah, that sounds good. Let me read it. And I was like, oh man. I was like, okay, I got to tell you, like, the script sucks. Like, it's not my best work. It's not even finished. It's like, it's not my proudest work, and I don't want it to reflect badly on me. But he's like, yeah, let me read it anyway. So he read it, and then if I remember correctly, I think it was Christmas morning, like 6 a.m. of 2017, I think it was. he messaged me and he's like, I love it. Like, I want to do it. I was like, you serious? And of course, the script needed a lot of work. So over the coming months, we did multiple drafts and we did put a lot more work into it and got it up to shape. And, I'd been let down before where I'd option a script or something and then, it would just never go anywhere and they'd give up. So I was kind of unsure whether or not it would actually happen. But Jarvis pulled it together, made the movie happen. I got paid. The movie got finished and won some awards and won Best Picture at a few film festivals in Canada and around the world. And kind of, let me plant my flag that it's like, I actually am a real screenwriter. I, made something that someone else paid me for and produced, and it turned out well. So it was kind of a good way to, build the self-confidence and everything. So, I started writing more and more, and I've sold more scripts since then. And Jarvis has gone on to direct and produce other films. And he actually just this year, they're in post-production on another one that he directed that I wrote. It's called Markings for Murder. So
Markings for Murder. Well, we will look out for that. I will definitely check it out. The poster for John 3:16 is hilarious. The see-through garb, Jesus garb, it's a lot. It's awesome.
Yeah, I'm not sure what because I remember we had one, or Jarvis had one poster, and then when they signed with the distributor made a different poster, and it made it look funny, which the movie isn't. And I remember that all of a sudden became a problem because it's not a comedy. And I remember there was some debate over whether or not they're going to go with that poster. And so I wasn't really part of that conversation, so I don't know what happened with it. But it's just like, yeah, it's a very kind of serious, kind of feel good, like heartwarming story. And
yeah.
So it's like making it funny was maybe not the best way to go, but I can't remember. I don't know what was decided or what what they figured out in the end.
The official poster, I think you're right. It's funny. It can be viewed as, it's not funny on its face, but it can be viewed as funny.
Oh, okay.
And you're right. It causes issues, and it's these little things that get in the way sometimes of the ultimate or greatest success indie film or any film can have. If I really think about that poster, it's not just sort of the translucent, gown that, our Jesus character is wearing. It's also like the choice of font used on the poster. And I want to say that because for those listening, just think about how small of a detail that is. Like, you can't put yourself in a position where you're like not paying attention to that. Like, oh, it's just font. Who cares? No, it matters. On our film, Adult Interference, it had what we would call, the producers called, sort of ketchup and mustard key art. And the poster was awesome. It was hand drawn, but some of the accompaniment around it was a little goofy. And this is a movie about a guy who is an alcoholic and is the last one to find out, so there are serious moments in this movie, and it is a comedy. So it kind of worked, but it also was like, maybe a better or more appropriate color scheme and font would have been there. But once it's done, it's kind of you have to catch it way in advance is the point. Almost like you do an animation, how you edit first. You have to kind of catch it in advance to prevent the mistake. You said something in the description of how you sold your screenplay, which is you were telling Jarvis, hey, let me tell you something, this script isn't any good. And on the Bonsai side, not the Make It podcast side, but on the Bonsai creative side, we go to panels, workshops, we host workshops, we do consults every week with writers who give us a project and are kind of at first surprised to find that we have some feedback in so many different areas of a particular script. And it occurred to me that most writers don't know when something is good or bad. So how did you figure it out?
I kind of, you just have a sense for it. And I mean, obviously, there's always going to be writers that are better than me, and they're going to be able to, point out things that I can improve on. And people also just have different opinions. I mean, it could be the best script in the world and 100 different people read it and could be like, hey, you should do this instead or change this. So I kind of take everything with a grain of salt, but I am aware kind of my own abilities. And
Can I
know
push back on you on that concept, Brandon, a little bit?
Yeah.
My favorite screenplay is Michael Clayton. My favorite one to read. There are others that are really close, and maybe there are some that even beat it. But off the top of my head, I tell people, if you want to see how to write a screenplay, read Michael Clayton. And it's not a genre thing. It's a pacing thing. It's a beats thing. Tony Gilroy is just brilliant. And I would say that, no, 100 people would read that and say, that's a great script. What a great story you just wrote. And so I hear what you're saying about like people have this subjective, but there are works of art that are just objectively great, right?
Yeah, I suppose. And it's not necessarily whether it's good or bad. It's just, especially if it comes to the point where we're going to make this thing, all of a sudden they're like, well, you know what? If you change that one part to you make that a boat instead because we could shoot at a marina. Like everyone has those kind of things. And it's like, no, man, I don't want to do that. So everyone, and of course, like say directors of photography versus like props people, they're all going to have like their own kind of bias. Yeah, where they just want, I want this change a little bit to kind of, you know, showcase my talents. And so there are things like that. And I mean, I don't think anything ever reaches perfection, but there are some things that are just damn good. You know, even in Hollywood, I mean, there's a lot of crap, but there's also a lot of things that are just like these people at the top of their game. So they're so good. I mean, yeah, we all have screenplays that we just love, but I even have now, I have scripts that I've written that, you know, people on my team and that I know they just love. We want to make this, we want to make it. It's perfect. And then I'll take it to a producer and he'll be like, yeah, I just don't see it. And I'm kind of like, what? It's like everyone else loves it. And it's just like, okay, like, doesn't bother me. I mean, other people like it, but, and sometimes they'll give me their reasoning and it's like, I see what you mean. And, you know, they give me some hints but it's like, that's not what I want to do with it. It's like, even if that would make it like, quote, better, that's just not what I want to do with it. And I want to be different and I kind of want to do it my way. So that's kind of my thinking on it. We're
guilty of that. I'll confess to that, Brandon. We're guilty of that. We have been on consults with horror writers and we'll say, you know, don't kill that person. That changes. It takes us out of it as we like, we wouldn't want to be associated with a killing like that of that type of character. And they're like, well, you know, you guys can fuck off. We think this is horror. So you're like, okay, well, you're right. Yeah. You're right. It's just not for us. It's like you said, it's not bad or good. It's just not for us. If you kill that 7-year-old girl or whatever. Yeah. You know, there's like stuff like that happens all the time where it's not about good or bad. Cause I do think I take a lesson from when I was doing music in another life, a lifetime ago, where there's the type of critique you get when you're good and the type of critique you get when you aren't sonically there yet. Meaning you can, there's a level of music making where it's not playable professionally. So you have big problems. You have like, you don't know how to mix, your equipment isn't good enough to create fidelity that can be on the radio, your singing, your musicality, production, whatever. And then there's the kind of critique like a professional artist gets, right? It's like, believe it or not, even the Eagles have critics, right? Yeah. Or, you know, my favorite rock band of all time, you know, they took a ton of criticism, the Smashing Pumpkins, right? Mostly because of Billy Corgan, but his voice and then just the way he writes, but they didn't have that beginner's issue of this doesn't meet the professional benchmark. So yeah, I will say that. True. Yeah. It's like, yeah, like I think I've reached the point just doing this professionally where I'm good enough. Like I'm not making the you know, your first script ever mistakes where I don't know what I'm doing. I'm at the point where I can write something. This is how a screenplay is done. Okay. Like I've reached that benchmark. So most of the criticisms are more story based. It's not like you don't know how to tell a story. It's more this part doesn't work or I don't like this kind of thing. And some of those, like I take it, you know, I'll listen. If it's people on my team, like, hey, we're making this movie together, that kind of matters more. But sometimes other people, it's kind of like they may be right,
and I could either take their advice or not. And sometimes I just want to stick to my own guns. And even with my graphic novel, The Boy with a Balloon for a Head, I had
Yeah.
one publisher. They didn't like the fact that the balloon boy basically killed himself at the end. He popped his head. They're like, you can't do that. They had this other idea of how he could live, and they're like, if you change it, we'll publish it. And I was like, man, like I can't go back on my story. I gotta like be true to myself, right? So I'm like, okay, I'm like, sorry, I'm gonna have to turn down the deal then because and publish it myself because I can't do that just because I was told to. So and it's one of those things like everyone's gonna have an opinion on everything, and there's some of my favorite movies that if I could be in charge of it, I would take out a couple parts and I would, it's like even just, say The Godfather that I love. There's little things in there that if I really, really had to, I could pick apart. So I don't
Yeah.
think anything's really above being picked apart, but you always have to be willing to learn because if you just never accept anything, then not only are you never going to learn, but you're also going to be seen as kind of a jerk, and then you're just going to have people not wanting to work with you. So even
That's
on our new one, it's I write a draft and kind of everyone wants to throw in their own 2 cents, and it's like, okay, I'll take that idea. I'll take that idea. I'm not going to take every idea because I'm not just going to let other people tell me what to write and then I do all the work.
Right. You lose your
Um,
POV.
what's that? Yeah,
You
yeah,
lose,
exactly.
you lose your POV if you do that.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. And I did that like early on. I had a script called Mother-in-Law,
Mhm.
and I remember I paid a bunch of different services to get like feedback. And I started like, I'll take a bit of theirs and then pay this other one, and I change it to there. And then by the end, it's like I had this Frankenstein script that was made up of like 9 people's ideas, and none of them were mine. And the story didn't make sense, and I didn't like it. And I was like, and I was too far in. I couldn't even, other than scrapping it and going back to my first draft, I just had to basically I gave up on it. And it's sitting on my laptop. One of these days I'll go back and make it proper, but I
Yeah.
would have been better off just not listening to, and these are industry professionals. I would have been better off listening to none of them because at least it had my voice in it.
Yeah. The secret about Hollywood coverage, the two things about it is the person reading it might be an intern straight out of USC Film School
Yeah.
or some other place like that, that although they are smart enough to be there, they don't have the life experience to critique an adult's writing based on maybe inexperience. So that's one thing to just keep in mind when you get that feedback. You had maybe a 20-year-old read it or a 22-year-old read it. It changes the game. And then, totally different generations and expectations, for example. And then the second thing is that the score is always a 7. Or if they use a 0 to 50 rating, it'll always be a 35.
Yeah.
And so 7's the bailout number. It's the number they've learned will get you to buy more coverage. If they give a 6, that means they need serious work. It's not, it's just barely, readable. If you give an 8, then that's not satisfactory either, because the person who bought the coverage is like, well, if it's an 8, it's makeable, right?
Mhm.
Like let's buy this thing. So 7 ends up being the bailout number on most coverage, or if it's 0 to 50, it'll be a 35.
Yeah, I've stopped using all those kind of things, and I've also noticed like I've had my scripts where I've written them, I've taken people's feedback, and I've changed them. And then I've gone on to option the script, and then all of a sudden I have the producer, the guy that's actually going to pay me and make the movie. He wants his own changes, which undoes all that anyway.
Yeah.
So it's like, why am I taking advice from people that are not writing me a paycheck and have nothing to do with the movie? I'll take advice from the people who are making this movie because
Right.
they're the voices that actually matter, because it comes down to me making a living, right? So so it's kind of depends on who's saying it. And yeah, a lot of the time too, it's someone with less experience than me. And it's like, well, anyone can have an opinion, and so I don't take their advice to heart as much. If it's someone that's more experienced, I'll be like, they probably know what they're talking about, so I'll really consider it. But a lot of the time, especially now that I'm making my own films for the most part, I really like to just stick to my own vision, because like right or wrong, I want it to be my movie. And I think the kind of people that like my stuff want it to be my movie. They don't want Tarantino to be taking ideas and changing his stuff based on an intern's feedback. They're like, no, we just want Tarantino to tell a story because that's what we came here for. So not that I'm on his level yet, but I kind of just, I like to do things my way. And I think that's kind of, it's what makes my story better.
You mentioned Grotesque, your new film. Can you tell the audience what this movie is about? And it's kind of hilarious. And then and hopefully scary as well, but it's kind of it's unusual. So I'll just couch it by saying that. And then what was the inspiration for it?
Yeah, basically, Grotesque is about a young woman named Mildred Moyer. She was born with like an enormous nose. This nose, it's like 6-7 inches long. She's been ridiculed her whole life. Finally, she gets to the point where she's like, you know what? Like, I'm sick of this. I'm gonna get plastic surgery so I can feel confident with myself. But she's a broke student type person. She's an intern at a cosmetics company. She can't afford a real plastic surgeon. So she goes to this cheap guy who works out of a strip club basement.
Mm.
And of course, something happens, and obviously it goes wrong, and her nose gets cut off, and she's left with this big hole in her face. So at that point, she absolutely snaps and basically goes on a killing rampage and starts killing everyone that ever made fun of her, or basically that ever offended her in any way.
Yeah.
And through doing so, she kind of all of a sudden finds herself. That even though obviously what she's doing is wrong, but she's just like, this is what I've been supposed to do all my life. And all of a sudden she's no longer like the scared, shy Mildred she was before. She's the like super confident, you fuck with me, you die person. And yeah, that's basically it. And it's a horror comedy. It's a slasher comedy, I guess. There's some gruesome parts in it, but I think people are gonna laugh more, or people do laugh more than they get scared.
Yeah.
So it definitely has I wouldn't say it's like American Psycho. It's maybe a little bit of American Psycho, a little bit of some other things, but it's getting a wonderful reaction to it, and I'm glad people are responding to it and loving it the way they do.
Reminds me of a short film that's a slasher comedy named Fetish. And I won't give anything away, but this guy has sort of this ridiculous male pattern balding, similar to your character's nose, and finds himself lonely due to this, and then finally meets someone, and he has to fight the urge not to indulge his fetish. And I will leave it at that. So after you watch Grotesque by the one and only Brandon Rhiness, then go find Fetish. I think you can watch it on Amazon Prime or something. You mentioned doing your own films now. That doesn't just mean you're writing them. You're now producing and directing. So what new challenges has that presented for you? And which do you prefer? Do you prefer producing, directing, writing only? If you had to
I'm writer number one, director number two, producer number three. So like I write a lot. I have directed some short films like that. I've been hired to write someone else's thing, but I don't do that very often. I like to direct my own stuff, but I will write most of the way I make my living is writing scripts for other people, because that's what pays better. But yeah, I like being in control of my own project. And some of them, when I'm writing a script, some of them I know I'm never going to do this, or probably never going to do it. It's like, this is one I'll try to sell. Some, as I'm writing it, I'm like, this one's for me. Like, I want to do this one myself. And then I have others that are kind of like, if I sell it in the next few years, I'll sell it. If the opportunity arises to make it, I'll make it. But of course, the challenge is it always comes down to money. That's the thing. I mean, as an indie filmmaker, I'm always finding ways to just cut costs, make things cheaper. But it's just somehow even when very little cost, there's always cost. It adds up. It adds up. And it's just the way it is. And part of the creativity is how do you raise the money? And I hate doing that. Like, I wish I just had unlimited resources and I could just do what I want. But the world doesn't work like that. And it always comes down to, you get all excited about doing this movie, and then it's like, okay, we need this huge amount of money. How are we going to do that? And all of a sudden, you just feel like the air sucked out of the room. It's like, great. Right. Now we have to do that. And somehow we figure it out. And I've gotten to a point now, after having done several films, it's getting easier. People are willing to give us money to help out, because they see like, hey, if I can get on board this project, get my name attached to it, it's going to get made, for one. It's going to turn out fairly well. And they just want to be part of it. So I think Grotesque was the first movie I've done where I didn't put like any of my own money into it. Usually at first I had to fund the entire thing. And eventually I, find someone and we go 50-50. And then we'd have a small group together, or we do crowdfunding. And for Grotesque, I don't think I put like any of my own money in. If I did, it was, very small amount. So it just shows that we've kind of proven ourselves that we're it's hard to take, or it's hard to give money to someone that hasn't done it before, because they could just take your money and run. They could just take your money and make a really bad project. I've kind of shown that I make something that's going to turn out well. People are going to like it. And it just kind of gets easier just with that. And you also learn the tricks of like, what can we get for super cheap? You know, I know people that'll let us shoot in their house. That'll save us on location costs, that kind of thing. And we just kind of know all these little tricks. So it kind of gets easier, but that's always the biggest barrier now. Like our team is so great, like Julie and Sam, Elizabeth, like all the people we work with we're just so great at getting things done. But you can only do so much until it's like, okay, we need the money now to do it. And then, then it's, a lot of just grinding gears and doing whatever you got to do to raise it so that you can make the magic happen.
Yeah. In recent years, we've been a lot more careful with our film investments, but we still hold sort of the general belief that you need to invest in the same filmmakers over and over and over again. And your ROI comes maybe 10 years later. The ROI comes on the 10th film. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Or maybe if you're lucky, you have an auteur you're working with, maybe it comes on the 5th film or 6th film. So you're basically a patron saint to this creative until they get to a place where what they make is award-winning level. And then all of a sudden you've sort of nurtured this stock, if you will, and then you get the ROI there. But if you go into it as an investor wanting to get some, huge nut out of the initial investment in a first time or second time filmmaker, you've really, fooled yourself. And in the words of the great Richard Feynman, we must not fool ourselves, and we are the easiest ones to fool. And it does happen. You do get unicorns, but just go in knowing that it's unlikely that you will have to basically hit the lottery on a first or second time filmmaker. And if you're a first or second time EP or producer, you might be the hindrance to that ultimate or top level success the film can have. Another thing, based on something you said there about running off with the money, if you are someone out there listening to this, if you are someone who's looking to invest in a filmmaker or a film outside of crowdfunding sources, so direct relationship where you get to help build the project, you have to just make sure you have an escrow account where that money goes to. And then that kind of prevents the filmmaker from running off with the money, as Brandon put it. So always have like a escrow account that everybody has access to, or the key players have access to, so you don't feel like you're locked out of seeing the money flow. And then your legal team can help with that as well. The other option is to have a bank set up a draw system for your filmmaker, so that it kind of works like a HELOC loan almost, but it's not. But it basically says the filmmaker can go to that bank and say, hey, we need $10,000 for this rental, and then $10,000 and not a penny more is taken out. All right. And then where the money flow is going. It's easy accounting if you end up getting the CAMA accountant on the other side of it. So just a couple of key points there. You mentioned that you typically do horror. What draws you to horror as your favorite genre? And have you ever written a horror? I know you wrote a novel as well. We'll get to that. But have you ever written a screenplay that actually scared you as you were writing it?
Ooh, that's I can't think of one on top of my head. I love horror. It's kind of maybe the same reason that I like heavy metal music. It's just I like things that are just like edgier. It's just like it's heavier. It's edgier. It's not pop. It's just got harder core, I guess, is for lack of a better word. And when I was younger, I used to be scared, traumatized from horror movies. Like when I was
really
elementary school, I'd be at a sleepover at a friend's house and we'd watch a horror movie and I'd just be traumatized for weeks and just disturbed by it. Maybe, my active imagination. And I basically stopped.
Which movie did that to you, Brandon? Just
the very first one was Return of the Living Dead 2. which
Ooh.
is funny because it's basically a horror comedy. I got it on Blu-ray the other day, and it's like this movie is not scary, but to 10-year-old Brandon, it's scary.
Right.
And then Nightmare on Elm Street 3, which is probably my favorite of the series. That one
Yeah.
traumatized me. I still like them. That's the thing. It wasn't like I hated them. It's
Yeah.
like I like this, but I'm traumatized. And I was probably like 16 or 17 before I really started watching horror movies because it's not like I'd be scared of them anymore. I just gave up on them. I didn't think about it. I just watch I'd watch Star Wars, RoboCop, or whatever, and then one day I was like, I wonder, I could probably watch a horror movie. I'm not, I'm old enough. I'm not going to be scared. So I watched some of the Jason movies, like the Friday the 13th, and I just like something clicked. I'm like, oh my god, this is great. So I'd watch all of them, all the Freddys, all the Halloweens, all the Leprechauns, all the Hellraisers, just all these movies. I just couldn't get enough, and it's continued to this day that there's something about them that other movies don't have. Other movies can be great. Forrest Gump is great,
Yeah.
but it doesn't have that edge that like Hellraiser has. It's
Certainly
just
not.
a different kind of thing, and it's almost like I like to be scary a bit. Where if you're just making all love stories, it's one thing, but people find out you make horror, all of a sudden it's like they're not scared of you, but it's just like I don't know. It's hard to explain, but there's something about it. It's just like edgier, and it kind of makes you proud. And I really like the community around horror movies.
Yeah.
Like a lot of movies don't like drama that doesn't really have a community built around it. Whereas
Yeah.
horror movies have a very definite fan base, and they're very forgiving. Like, well, the horror movie, I'd watch any cheap slasher movie and still like it. Whereas a
I
drama,
will
it
agree
has
with
to
that.
it has to be bigger, right? So like horror fans, especially the market I'm working in, like I don't have millions of dollars to make Avengers. I have to make these cheap horror movies and just do the best we can. If we did like a drama, like people would rip us apart because it's like, why is it so cheap? And it's like, well, if we do it as a horror movie, it's like that's what people are expecting, and they even like it because of that. People
Right.
love grotesque because it doesn't look like a polished Hollywood movie. It looks like a indie horror movie, like from the 70s or 80s, which is kind of what people love. So yeah.
I agree. We did a movie named All Light Will End. And even though I think it has something like a 4-star rating on IMDb, it has over 2,000 ratings.
Yeah.
Which is far, far more than some of the biggest Hollywood movies out. And it's all thanks to this great horror community that will watch your movie, will rate your movie. The horror review and blog circuit is amazing, easily the best. So it was so much. We were welcomed with such warm arms in the horror community when it was time to review the movie than in the sci-fi or drama or comedy realm with our other 2 feature films. So I will totally agree with you about the audience. The audience for horror, even though they're probably, a bunch of weirdos, there are kind of weirdos. And God love them. They're cool people, and they support independent film better than any other audience that I can really think of. You mentioned the horror films that you grew up on. For me, Nightmare on Elm Street was the one as well, only because the villain existed in your own mind, so it seemed theoretically possible. Like to a kid, it's like, well, I go to sleep, I dream all the time if this guy shows up, and am I strong enough, to fight that off? But let's talk about horror films from this year, 2022. Some of the best rated ones were Hellbender, The Innocents, You Won't Be Alone, Nanny, which I saw. That was brilliant. I just found out the other day that The Menu with Ralph Fiennes is considered a horror movie. Which of those jumped out to you as something that's up Brandon's alley? And if none of them, what was your favorite horror movie of 2022?
Oh god, it's hard to say. Honestly, I haven't seen any of those ones you mentioned. I've watched a ton of horror movies. I must just be watching a different list or something. I've heard of all those ones. I don't really judge things by year because I'll watch a bunch of things and it's like, when did this come out? Oh, 2014 or 1999. Okay. So I have a hard time knowing what came out.
Maybe
year.
we adjust it to what's the best horror film you've seen recently?
It's a bit older now, but like honestly, I like Hereditary. I know
Really?
it's
Yeah, it's a good
there's a
one.
lot of people like love it. A lot of people hate it. It's just probably going to be an endless internet debate over it, but I love it. I think it's awesome. Same with Midsummer. I like Ari Aster, is that his name?
Yeah, yeah,
The
yeah.
director.
Now, is that pronounced
Um,
midsummer or is it midsummer?
mids Probably Midsummer, I think.
Yeah. There are people that are
Just spelled
sticklers
weird.
for pronunciation on that, but it's
Midsummer.
A24 and they did Nanny as well. And
Oh yeah.
I watched Nanny I watched it at the Nashville Film Festival, and I thought it was, outside of being more spooky than scary, but besides being spooky and mystical, it was just beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
It was just so well done. You know, it's done on that A24 level. But if you think back to Ex Machina, for example, and like how that was shot and how it sort of slowly let that sort of fear grow, I just think it was shot well. And if I can just say this, it's kind of an aside. I don't, whoever the, I used to know the DP's name. I'll look it up, but whoever the DP is, I've never seen Black actors shot so well. Just the lighting, the color. It's really hard to shoot dark skinned Black people. It's really hard to photograph dark skinned Black people. It's just a fact. And they just, the way it was done, no one's going to, Brandon, no one but this podcast, I mean, you were going to talk about this. It was unbelievable. And kudos to the DP on that. You did mention that your horrors tend to have a comedic theme. Have you ever made a comedy, or have you written a comedy yet that just isn't a horror at all?
Yeah, like my previous movie to Grotesque was Hot Box, which is like a stoner comedy. We actually got endorsed by Tommy Chong, who's
That's right, Hot
from
Box.
Edmonton.
Yeah.
And it was hard because everyone that watched it loved it. Like it has a very, very, very small cult following. Like it was a very loved movie, but comedy doesn't have the fan base that horror does. So like horror fans across the world will watch any horror movie they can get their hands on. A comedy, unless it has, Adam Sandler or Will Ferrell or some person in it, it's so hard to get people to watch.
It's like you almost just need a cameo
from
from one of those guys and you'll be okay.
Yeah, if we just had something, but we had it all Edmonton actors, and so the people that watched it, oh, this is hilarious, but it just didn't get the reach we wanted.
Aren't the biggest cannabis companies in the world in Canada, though?
What's that?
Aren't the biggest cannabis companies in the world in Canada?
That could be. It's legalized here, so we have all sorts of facilities around. So
Tilray's Canadian, maybe, Brandon.
Yeah, I don't know. We thought that would, because I think we came out. It was like the week it was legalized, or it was like right at the same time we came out, and we were hoping that would be some sort of marketing thing, and it just didn't. It's just like the movie kind of here it is, and then just disappeared, and I'm selling a bunch of DVDs now that I'm making DVDs, so we're selling quite a few of those. So it has a bit of life left in it, but it's just hard. I want to do another comedy because I like it, but just knowing going in, it's hard to justify that we're going to make something that no one's going to watch. If we make another horror,
was it to keep the horror out of Hot Box?
I guess it is a little bit of horror because part of it is this group of goth girls do magic mushrooms, and they think there's a serial killer at the party.
Okay.
So they're all freaking out that there's a killer when, of course, it turns out there's not, and so nothing really happens. But there is a little bit of that kind of horror to it, but it's not a horror movie at all. It's straight up, comedy.
Yeah.
But I do want to do a straight up horror. I've done some short horror films, but so many times, even in the comics, like I try to make something serious or scary, and then the comedy just kind of seeps in, and next thing you know, it's hilarious.
Where do you get that from? Is it like your parents, or did you grow up watching a particular comedian or sitcom or show?
I don't know.
Like drove your comedic taste?
It's just, I don't know. It's just something that's like ingrained in me. And like our comic book that me and my producing partner, Adam Chuck came up with called Ghoul Squad. And, it's about, a bunch of like monster type characters. And it was supposed to be serious. As I started writing it, it just got funnier and funnier and funnier. And then, of course, everyone that reads it, like, oh, this is hilarious.
You can't help yourself.
It's not really supposed to be. And then it's like, screw it. I'll just make it a comedy, right? And then, it got popular because it was funny. So it's not like what I'm doing is wrong. But I do kind of want to do for what we're doing Grotesque 2 at the moment, or we're preparing for it. But
Oh,
I
cool.
want to do something that's flat out like, let's try to do something scary and just see what happens.
You're still working with Adam?
Yeah, somewhat. He's kind of taken the back seat to things for the most part. Yeah, he's kind of involved if I need be, but he's kind of took his own path and stuff. So I'm basically kind of doing my own thing now.
Got it. Plans for him to come back, or like did he move out of media and entertainment altogether?
No, we still live together. He's still my roommate.
Oh, okay. Got it.
So it's like we see each other all the time, but it's like I moved on to his specialty was kind of just like the artwork and stuff, and I've moved into film for the most part and writing novels, so it's kind of not as much for him to do. So but yeah, that's a good question. I'd love to have him come back. He's always been supportive. He'll share my stuff, and I'll run my ideas by him, and I'll show him things I'm working on. So he's there, for moral support, but he just doesn't actively work in it so much anymore.
Got it. By the way, the cinematographer for the movie Nanny by A24 is Rena Yang. Kudos to you, Rena. Love your work. You mentioned selling scripts earlier in the conversation. Can you just share with the audience your process for selling your scripts? Like, is there anything tried and true, any tactics or tools you use to do that?
I've tried different methods. I've kind of found what works for me, and other people might even have a better system that I don't know about. Whenever I talk to other writers, I like to know, like, how do you do it? Because maybe there's some little tidbit there I can pick up. But
right,
like I use services like Inktip and Screenwriting Staffing. You pay them $20 a month or whatever it is, and they'll let you know, like, producers are looking for this type of script, and you would just reach out to that producer if you have it. So I do those, and like I write fast, like I write a ton of things, so I always have things to pitch.
yeah.
But those kind of services are good because you can also see what's popular. So for Inktip, if I see week after week, it's like nonstop, like, oh, they're looking for romantic comedies. I'm like, okay, well, I should write a romantic comedy. So I wrote one, and probably like within a week, bam, optioned it.
Wow.
Just because it's like there's a big demand for it. And for a while, it'll be like, your romantic comedies are big for a while, and then they'll kind of go away. And then I remember for about a year, it was any movie with like Chinese elements, because the Chinese government was like investing a bunch of money into like basically Western written scripts that could be made in China.
Right.
So it's like, if it's a story that's Chinese people, anything like that, like they're looking for it. And then that dried up, and then that's not really a thing anymore. But horror has always kind of been a staple. But then like action movies seem to be big now. It seems like everyone's looking for action movies. So like, guess what? As soon as we're done the things I'm working on, I'm going to write 1 or 2 action movies because I know they're in demand. So I'd pitch to those people. I have a database I keep of like a spreadsheet of who I pitched to when, what their response was. And anyone who responds favorably, like either by buying the script or, we love it, but like, it's too expensive or anything like that, I kind of keep a separate list of them, and they're the first ones I go to the next time. I'll say, hey, remember me? I'm the guy that wrote this other thing that you liked. I have a new script. Are you interested? Just so I can kind of keep that stable of people a little bit closer. And a lot of them, even if they don't themselves buy one of my scripts, if they know about me, they frequently tell someone else about me. By the way, like, I know this other guy, he's looking for a horror script, talk to him. And I've gotten some either jobs or sold scripts that way. And like, I'll go over just anything like Twitter or Facebook. You'll frequently see things people will, like how I met Jarvis when I sold my first script. Hi, I'm so-and-so. I'm looking for a horror script. I'm looking for a sci-fi script. Send me a DM. So I'll send them a DM, and sometimes they'll ignore me. Sometimes they'll like the script, but I start building their relationships. But I mean, I pitch like 10, 20, 50 times per week. Of just like,
wow,
I have a new script, and every year or two, because I'm always getting better as a writer. So even if I read a script from 3 years ago, even though I was selling scripts back then, if I read them, it's like, oh my God, like this is embarrassing. I can't show this. It's not that good. So I'll rewrite it and make it up to my current standard. And sometimes that's all it takes, is like, I just got to be a little bit better, and then it'll sell.
Brilliant. And so on Inktip, and was the second one called Screenwriter Staffing?
screenwriting staffing. Yeah, it's like SS Screenwriting Staffing Utopia, I think is the official name.
Screenwriting Staffing Utopia. So on that, you get to name your price. Is that correct?
Yeah, basically they'll just send you pay $20 a month, and they'll just send you like every few days you'll get an email that says this person from this company is looking for horror scripts that are set on an island. So if you have that, send them an email. So if you have a script like that,
but you get to say what you want to charge for your script, though.
Yeah, you would contact them directly and work out a deal. Screenwriting staffing, they have nothing to do with it. They just basically collect and send you the information of who's looking for what.
Got it.
So you would just work out your own deal with
subscription fees, then, Brandon, right? And then the deal,
they take your $20 a month, and that's it. So
that's it. Okay,
which is pretty good because
huge.
Yeah, like I've had people say like, oh, like Inktip's too expensive, or like, but it's like, they're like $20-$30 a month. But the thing is, if you sell one script, that's going to cover like years worth of that subscription. So it's worth having that just to have get a couple sales. So yeah, those are definitely worth checking out. There's other services like that. I've tried some of the other ones and haven't had any success with them for whatever reason. So I've stopped using them, but the ones that work just work. I even had, I've had luck. It's probably like 4 or 5 years ago now. I spent like an entire summer cold emailing 10 producers every day for like 3-4 months. And, I would just go on IMDb Pro, type in the name of a horror movie, and I would just like find the producer, send them an email. And then, at some place on the page, you would say like, if you like this movie, you might also like this movie because it's similar. So I would click on all of those, and then I would pitch either the director or the producer. And then I just kept doing that until I pitched like hundreds and hundreds, and probably 90% ignored me. A couple of them responded, unfavorably, or, they weren't interested. But one guy was like, yeah, your script sounds interesting. Send it to me. And he didn't buy it, but he referred me to someone else who ended up buying it. And at the time, that was like the most money I'd ever made on a script. So basically, it was worth me spending all that time doing it just to get that one sale. So I don't really cold email anymore. Maybe, I don't know if I should or not. I don't really like doing it because I don't want to come across as spamming people.
Right.
But sometimes it's good just to reach out to people, and anyone that reacts favorably to my pitch, like, say they like it for whatever reason, I'll go and I'll add them on Twitter. I'll try to add them on Facebook, just so they're in my circle all of a sudden. So all of a sudden they'll start seeing my posts. They might see my name pop up once in a while. So when it comes time, they need to hire a writer, my name might be the one they remember. And so it's good just to have people like that in your vicinity.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. You have so much skin in the game. And that's really what it requires to be successful at anything. When you told me the story about friends who think Inktip is too expensive, I immediately thought everything is expensive if you're bad.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what your field is. If you're bad at it, you're going to pay more than the person who's good at it.
Yeah. And that's, I've had people too. They're like, Inktip doesn't work. And it's like, well, you can't say the service doesn't work. Is it, it's just there. It's like, if your script sucks, no one's ever going to buy it, no matter what service you use. Right. So it's like, it'd be like, Craigslist doesn't work. It's like, what do you mean it doesn't work? If what you're selling is a piece of crap, or you're charging too much, there's no hope for it. So it's like, as long as you're selling a good product, it'll sell. They're just like the marketplace for it. So it all comes down to you. But yeah, like a bad script will never sell.
Yeah. Yeah. Great point. You mentioned as well earlier in this conversation, raising capital for your films has gotten easier as you do more films. Are there any methods that you can share about capital raise, things that have worked for you, things that definitely don't work? Any advice in that regard?
Yeah, basically we just I've cranked out so many things over the last few years. I've technically been doing this all my life, like high school, but I really just kind of dabbled in it until about 2015, that's where I started let's do this for real.
Right.
And since I think I have 60 IMDb credits now or something. I've made a ton of stuff. I said, holy crap.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've worked hard to because, sometimes I could tell people, there's so many people that talk a big game in this industry.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, yeah, like, put your money where your mouth is. So sometimes when I talk to people, I can almost see in their eyes that it's like they don't believe me. They're just kind of like, uh-huh. And
Hmm.
it's just like, I gotta wait for them. They gotta go look on IMDb and be like, oh shit,
Hmm.
okay, you are for real.
Hmm.
Um, so once you could prove you could do that, and it's like, yeah, you go on IMDb, you go to my YouTube channel, you can see these are all the things I made. It's like, I can do it. So if
Yeah.
you give me $5,000 to put towards something, it's going to get done. And this
Yeah.
is the kind of quality I can make. So people can kind of judge for themselves, and people get excited about that, is just the constant promotion, right? Some people like to be involved. And one guy gave me some money for our latest film, and he's like, I just want my name on the poster. That's it. And I
Oh
was
wow.
like, that's it. It's like, to me, I wouldn't even honestly care that much about it, but to him, he's just so excited about it. And he came to our premiere and got all the cast and crew to sign the poster. And so some people like that kind of thing. And, we've done crowdfunding, and that raised a little bit of money. That we haven't perfected it. We've raised, small amounts, but I remember at the Grotesque premiere, just in the lobby chatting with people after the movie let out, we had a few people that are like, yeah, I can kick in some money if you want to do another one. And by the time we left, it's like, we have enough money just from chatting with people in the lobby to probably shoot a very, very low budget movie. So it's like,
Yeah.
shit, let's do it. So once the ball gets rolling, and then you kind of develop the confidence where you could, approach someone who you think has money, and like, look, this is what we want to do. We just don't have the money for it. Is there any way you could like give us some money? And once you kind of do that, at first it's like, everyone hates asking, begging for money, but
Right.
eventually
Of course.
usually they're like, yeah, I can kick in a bit, or they have some sort of resources. You could film in my house. I own a farm you could shoot at. And it's like, oh, okay. Now the pieces are kind of coming together. And like you said earlier too, like we've taken a lot of money from people, and we've never promised them like a big return. We've always been upfront and honest. But when the movie's done, it's kind of like, look, when we start making money at this, if we pay your money back, we're back to zero and we can't continue.
Right.
If you want to roll the money over, we can use that money to make another movie and keep the whole thing going. And honestly, we've never had a single person ask for their money back, whether it's, $20,000 or whether it's, $100. They're all just like, yeah, I see the value in doing another one and another one and another one. And then once the ball's kind of going, then it's like, it might be Grotesque 2 before we hit it big, or Grotesque 3, or the next horror, or maybe the next romantic comedy. But like you said, it might just take, because Jarvis Griner, the director of John 3:16, he said the same thing you do. Is like, it's not going to be a one movie, you get rich. It's going to be like the 10th movie. It's like, you got to be committed. And that's where everyone else will drop out. Like, even since I started, some people have given up already. They make, a couple shorts, and then maybe they make one feature, or they started to do it and then it didn't work out. And eventually they get a day job and they just quit. And then there's the people that just grind it out and do it over and over and over again. And eventually it's going to be like, hopefully the money will start coming, and then you'll catch a big break, or you just have a big enough track record that you can do whatever you want. I'm starting to notice it now. It's like, it's no longer extremely hard to get a project off the ground. Now we just say, yeah, we're doing Grotesque 2. And the gears start going. All of a sudden, they believe us. They're like, yeah, I'll start getting the locations. And next thing you know, it's like, I'm busy on other stuff, and the movie's almost getting made without me, because it's just, we announce it's going to happen. And all of a sudden everyone's like, I want to be a part of it. I want to be a part of it. I want to be a part of it. And it's like, okay, we've got the whole crew filled and most of the cast. And like, I'm not even finished the second draft of the script yet. It's just, it's become that easy to get people excited. So if I can imagine 10 years from now, where we just have bigger budgets and even more experience, it's just going to be so easy to just, here's what we're doing, and we just know how to execute. Yeah. And it's like, it's hard at the beginning, because at the beginning, people wouldn't give us money. I remember just like, no one would give us money. We did a crowdfunding for I'm in Love with a Dead Girl, my short film. And of course, that was just, my parents, my brother, my grandparents, just family and friends of the people making the movie. It's like, I'll give you a chance. So it's like, all right, so we got enough to do that movie. But after that, it's like, you can only go back to the family well so many times before, they're just not going to give it to you anymore. So now we need, for crowdfunding, we need strangers to like our stuff. And that's where we're at, where all of a sudden it's like, holy cow, people that like our movies all of a sudden they're willing to just give us money in exchange for some sort of thing over Indiegogo to help get the movie made. And that was before Grotesque. Like for Grotesque 2, I'm kind of interested like how much bigger we've gotten, because like just online we have a way bigger fan base. Like I'm not used to this level of attention from a movie, because Hotbox was kind of moderate. Grotesque is like, for me, it's like an international sensation. Nothing compared to like Hollywood standards, but for me, it's like, whoa, this movie is like big. Like people are still like messaging me about how they love it and it's their favorite movie of 2020 or 2022. And so I think when it comes time to raise money again, it's just going to be a little bit easier.
Yeah.
But that's what it comes down to. And it's not always cash in hand. It's just like, what can we do to make it cheaper? And sometimes someone's like, like I got a summer house that you could use. No one's in it all summer. And it's like, okay, well, what if we move it from a campground to a summer house? And that way, instead of having to rent a campground for a week and spending thousands of dollars, we spend zero. And it's like the story is exactly the same. So it's like, that just frees up like $3,000 in our budget. And then it's like, okay, how do we cut like all these other costs? And then it's like, even on Grotesque, or other movies we've done, like the prop food that we have like in the scenes, we could also use to feed ourselves and the crew, and just anything like that a Hollywood movie wouldn't bother with, right? Because they could just spend money.
Right.
We're just like, how do we just be efficient with every single dollar we spend, and then we can make these movies for very, very cheap, and people are kind of shocked at how we did it. And it's like, just buy things from Dollarama. We want to, split a head open, and people think we use some sort of crazy high tech way. And it's like, no, we just bought a $4 Dollarama styrofoam head and then like painted it, and then it filled the inside with Jello. It's like the whole thing costs like $6. And so once you kind of learn those things, and I mean, there's other people more skilled than I am at that, and I'm sure like all indie filmmakers are in the same boat, but you just gotta just be smart with your money. And once you get everyone excited about it, like everyone brings their resources, and we're not like a big union shoot where there's like very strict rules over who touches what.
Right.
It's like we have actors that are helping carry furniture into the house, and like just everyone's helping decorate and all that kind of stuff. And it's like it's a definite team effort, and I just kind of love that everyone's on board. So it's hard to raise the money, but once you announce that we're doing it, it's like a steamroller. It's hard to stop. And actually, it's Julie Whalen, my co-producer on Grotesque. I kind of owe it to her that it's even got made, because we were actually in pre-production on a different movie. It was supposed to be the follow-up to Hotbox. It was called One Night Drunk. And we'd started pre-production on that. We were like just like a week into it. And I finished, it was like the first or second draft of Grotesque. And I just showed it to her, like, this is another project we could do down the road. And she read it and she's like, oh my God, this is awesome. Let's do this instead. And I was like, really? She's like, yeah, let's do it. And I was like, fucking hey, yeah, let's do it. And I remember at the time we had some money from Hotbox. We had something. We had like a few $1,000s. It's like we have enough to shoot for like a couple days. That's it. So she's like, well, let's do it. Let's shoot like 2 days. And if we run out of money, we wait a year and then shoot more. But like, let's just start. And I was like, yeah, you know what? Like so many people, we got to wait till we have our $1.5 million budget. And even movies here in Edmonton, there's things I've written that they're trying to raise like, $2 million. And like 5 years later, we're still trying to raise $2 million. Meanwhile, I've cranked out like 4 features. So it's like, you know what? It's like we have enough to get started. Let's just shoot and then kind of hope for the best. Barring, the Earth getting hit by an asteroid or something like that. It's like this movie will get done. It's like we'll get it done somehow.
Yeah, and tenacity and miracles is what it takes to make any independent film. And if I could distill down some of the lessons in what you just shared is, one, knowing the different types of capital is really important. Capital is not just money. And then 2 is no mercenaries. I think, when Nick and I started back in 2015, we got really lucky to work with the great Rashina Nash, who's now writing and directing for Disney. And she had hired out a crew of mercenary filmmakers for a comedy special we were going to shoot. And what we noticed is that as soon as that thing was done, they this, or rather, as soon as we wrote them their checks, they were out of there. They were gone. We didn't hear from them again. No check-ins. No, how did this go? They were there to do a job. They did a job and left. And it's not a great way to make a film. So you want to make films with people that you work with, where you can, have an expectation of how things are going to go, and know that everybody's in camp with you, and you lose together and you win together. I might take a left turn here just to mention to the audience that in 2019, you got worldwide distribution for a comic named Chainsaw Reindeer. And we mentioned before that you co-founded Higher Universe Comics. And so if you go to Higher Universe Comics website, I think it's higheruniversecomics.com or higheruniverse.com, or maybe it's CA.
I think it's thehigheruniverse.com.
Yeah, thehigheruniverse.com. You start to see all these characters, and you have a character. These are some of your character names: Acid Flashback Cat, Beaky McWeisenstein.
Yeah, that's one of Adam's.
Helmut von Lederhosen, Gormfloth, and then out of the blue, there's Darius Washington. So how did you come up with your character names? How do you do
these? Some of those ones you mentioned were Adams, like kind of before, it's probably like say 2012-ish.
Yeah.
Adam Storchuk, my roommate / friend / co-creator of Higher Universe, we'd come up with all these crazy ideas. A lot of those are ones he came up like in high school, like probably in the 80s or 90s, whenever that was. Like, they're pretty old ideas that he had. And of course, he's not really a storyteller so much, but he's good at drawing and coming up with concepts. Mm-hmm. So he'd come up with these things, and I would make a story out of it. I'd turn it into a story and write it. And he's like, and that kind of where it went. And when we started doing comics, a lot of the comics were his original ideas that we turned into something concrete. And then when I started the website, I was like, you know what? I want to put all the characters on there just so there's like a record. No one could say we stole it. No one can rip me off. It's like, hey, it's on there. I created this thing, or we created this thing. Mm-hmm. So all those characters are from different things. And some of them, like Darius Washington, is from, I wrote a pilot episode for it's like a children's, actually, honestly, I can't remember. It's been so long, I can't even remember which series. He might be from Detective Tokyo. Mm-hmm. I wrote a story about a detective dog, and he has this group of kids that work with him, and they have like a junior detectives thing. I think that's what that's from. And Gormflath, funny enough, the horror movie that we're shooting at the moment that we just finished wrapping on Monday, I took that name, and one of the characters is named that. And I remember someone's like, it's like, Brandon, I Googled Gormflath on Google, and like your website came up, and I was like, I'm allowed to steal my own names. It's like I came up with that one, and I want to come up with another character. So so we have all these crazy things. Like Acid Flashback Cat is part of my Stoner Kid world. Mm-hmm. And actually sucks. My Facebook got hacked a few weeks ago, and someone basically took away, like, they put themselves as admin of the Stoner Kid page and deleted me, and I can't get it back now. So basically someone stole my friggin' page, and that was my most successful page. So basically,
what did Facebook say about that?
They're so friggin' hard to get a hold of, and they're like, I got my personal account back, got control of that, but I just like tried a million different ways, and it's just hard to reach them, and they were not helpful. And basically their response was like, you need permission from the admins. And it's like, I am the admin. It's like, the guys stole it. They're not going to give me permission to get it back. So it's probably still up on Facebook, but it's not mine anymore. But I made a graphic novel about him and stuff. But Acid Flashback Cat was one of his, like, I don't know, friends or whatever, but it's one of those associated characters. So.
Brandon, that sucks, man. I'm sorry to hear that. And it reminds me of that Seinfeld episode where somebody steals his car. And this is the 90s, so he has a car phone, and Kramer's like, call him.
Yeah.
And he's like, no. He's like, call him. And he picks up the phone and calls him, and the thief answers the phone.
Yeah.
And Jerry's like, hey, did you steal my car? And the guy's like, yeah.
I've checked the page
So
out. Like
I just wonder if you could, like, if Facebook expects you to reach out to this guy and be like, "Hey, did you steal my Facebook page?"
Yeah.
You know,
nothing. I've been there. Nothing's changed on it. Like he hasn't. It still says created by Brandon Rhiness, as far as I know. So it's not like they did anything with it. But it's unfortunate. But it's like we have so many. I think we have like hundreds of characters that are just in one form or another. And if I had unlimited money and resources, like I'd turn everything into like a book or a comic book or a movie or an animated series. And there's actually, if you go on YouTube, I made two cartoons of Stoner Kid. There's two, like they're like 5 or 10 minute animated episodes. I don't think Acid Flashback Cat's in it, but some of the other characters are.
Yeah, I'll check that out for sure. What apps are you using, or did you and Adam use to draw and create these characters?
For most of them were just Adam's drawings on paper that he did. To get animated, a guy here in Edmonton, because I really didn't know how to do animation, but he had this idea because he was into like making video games. Like I'm not a video game guy, but apparently there's some sort of program where you can, design your own backgrounds and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So he's like, what we could do is we could design a background in this video game thing and then take the drawing and then animate the lips. And I was like, that sounds like it'll work to me. So I basically just gave him, I wrote the script, gave it to him. He used his own voice and everything and did all the animation. So it's, it's not extremely high tech, but it's funny enough.
Yeah.
And I think Adam did, I can't remember if Adam did all the drawing, but he did a lot of the drawings for it. But for most of my
anyone
comics,
judges that process, just go see the original pilot for South Park.
Yeah, it's kind of like that, right? Where it's like, if you look past how bad it looks, it's actually kind of funny. But for the most part, like I hire a lot of artists too. Like my comics, Chainsaw Reindeer was a guy named Carlos Trigo who lives in Spain. He was the artist for that one and probably made the comic what it is because it's my most famous comic.
Mm-hmm. That's tremendous, and I would recommend for this audience to go out and search for Chainsaw Reindeer and check it out. It's still doing well, right?
Yeah, it's that one was not published by me. That one was actually picked up by Action Lab Comics. So they're the people that they have a bigger reach than me. So that was kind of cool that it was actually in comic stores like all over the world. I remember some guy I know on Facebook lives in Poland. He's like, yeah, I was at my comic store and your comic was there. It's like, oh, and it was in the Philippines and Australia and like North America.
That's super cool. My favorite part about Chainsaw Reindeer, having not read it, Brandon, is closing my eyes and getting all the various images that come when you combine the word reindeer with chainsaw.
Yeah.
And there's a myriad ways you can go with your imagination once you combine those two words. I'm curious which creatives, I don't think you've ever mentioned this to me before, but what creatives do you most admire in the film industry, and what do they do from a technical or skill standpoint that makes them sort of stand apart for you?
It's kind of hard to answer because it's changed so much over time. I remember when I first started doing movies, it was basically Quentin Tarantino. I watched Reservoir Dogs, and I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do with my life. And I just love Tarantino. And of course, like every writer, my early scripts were all just Tarantino ripoffs, way too much dialogue, a lot of gun stuff and guys trying to be cool. And, just, a 16-year-old's version, knocking off Tarantino. They're pretty horrible. Over the years, I still don't mind Tarantino, but my tastes have changed and I'm just like, I'm not a big fan anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I've gone to the point, I was a big Stephen King fan for writing too. And even like now it's like, I don't like Stephen King as much anymore. Just, my tastes changed. So those guys kind of inspired me to kind of like, I can do this. If they can do it, I can do it. I'm going to follow in their footsteps. And I've gotten to the point now where there's a lot of people whose work I like, but I don't find myself really, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I don't find myself like looking up to anyone anymore.
Okay.
There's still people like, David Fincher, for example. It's like, yeah, like he's good. I like his movies. But I'm just so bent on like doing my own thing. So it's rare that I see someone, it's like, I want to be like that. And it's like, no, I want to be like myself. I'd honestly, I'd rather make far less money and just do what I want to do than following someone else's footsteps. So I'm always, I mean, my stuff is probably similar to other things. Even Grotesque is probably similar to other movies or things, but it's still my thing. And I'm starting to get to the point, even people on my team are starting to realize like, oh, that's a Brandon thing, where you kind of start to see, patterns emerge and kind of themes in there. So I really just want to forge my own path. And I really have respect for other people that do that. Because I mean, there's a million Hollywood directors and you can't really tell them apart. It's just all the movies kind of look the same. And it's like, so what's your job really? Just like, it's like, is a director even needed on a movie? It's like, they all look the same anyway. So like,
no POV.
And then there's some movies, like you're saying, some of those horrors where it's like, that's different. Like now I can see this is like a real human making this thing, and it starts to have its own kind of vibe to it. And I used to always talk about Kevin Smith. And then people would be like, oh, you're a big Kevin Smith fan. I'm like, not really. I really don't like Kevin Smith. I don't like his movies, but I like the fact that he had his own style. Like he's making his own thing.
You know a Kevin Smith movie when you see a Kevin Smith movie.
Yeah. And it's like, even though I don't particularly, it's not my taste, I respect the fact that he's making his own thing.
Yeah.
And I think, especially nowadays where it's kind of becoming easier to make your own thing. It's not like, 90s and earlier where, or even, heaven forbid, like 40s or 50s where it's like you had to work for the studio or you can't make a movie. There was just no way to get it done. Whereas now anyone can make a movie in their own house on their phone.
That's a great point.
People talk, so all of a sudden everyone has that opportunity. The downside to that is there's a whole lot of crap out there. Anyone can make stuff and it's hard to rise above everything else. But all of a sudden everyone
I want to interject on that though, Brandon, because that's a great point. Many of our guests, Brandon, have said what you said, but not in that way. It's kind of a touchstone. I want to jump on it real quick before I forget. We've heard, a handful of people say, pick up your phone, shoot something. You can make your own stuff these days. So that's not necessarily novel, but this idea that if you were in the 40s, you either worked for the studio or you couldn't make it. And I think that's the part that's taken for granted, which is that everybody knows you can go make your own thing now. But what would you do if you were in a time where if you were outside industry, you were just stuck? There's just, there is no consumer product for it. And it makes me think about what industries exist today in which the everyday quote unquote prosumer is excluded from that work or that creativity or that process. I hadn't ever thought about it through the lens of what if you were an absolute slave to the movie industry? Like you're basically forced to be a consumer or nothing else if you didn't want to go work for them. So
it was like, I mean, none of us were around in those days, but like they're writers a lot of time in like the 20s and 30s, like it'd be a 9-to-5 job. You would work for whatever studio, MGM, and you would sit at a desk writing their scripts from 9, take your lunch break, come back, and they would tell you, okay, when you're done that one, this is our next movie. And that would be your job. There's no like, hey, I got my own idea for a movie. It's like, no, the CEO of the company or whoever does that, they come up with the movies. You're a secretary. You sit there and write it. And if you wanted to be an actor and the studio didn't hire you, you're not an actor. That was just
it's literally the equivalent, Brandon, of saying go out and build your own car. Like a movie is that complex where it's like, what would happen if someone democratized the making of a vehicle so that you could, if you had the ambition and talent, could go out and just build your own car in your driveway and then just drive it. Yeah. Like that's what it's like.
Yeah.
The fact that this was democratized, probably in large part thanks to Kodak originally, but like this thing was democratized for everyday consumers. Like, wow. I thank you for that.
In a way, that's great. It's great because I couldn't operate, even making comic books, like even in my childhood in the 90s, like it just wasn't possible. You had to work for Marvel or DC or Image Comics when they came out. Like it was a big effort to make a comic, where now if you could draw, like you could pull the resources together and you can get your stuff out there. Yeah, the downside is there's a lot of stuff out there. But the thing is, now everyone has the opportunity. It's kind of like with music. Like, if you were in Beethoven's days, unless you're like one of the 7 richest families that can have a piano, like, and you're educated, you can't do music. It's just impossible.
Right.
Whereas now you don't even need an instrument. Like, anyone can make their music and release it the same day. And it's, in a way, it's just kind of great that people have that voice, because I don't think people should ever be like not made to shut up, but like they're basically held back because you just don't have the resources. You have all these ideas, but there's no way to execute it. So I kind of like that now you can do it.
Yeah.
But even though it is possible, anyone can make a movie on their phone easily. Most people, even if they want to do it, they won't, because so much of what we do comes down to just your own personal effort and drive. And most people will just not do it because it just does take effort. And it's easier to not do it. It's easier to give up. And most people will. Or they'll do it so infrequently and they won't try hard enough that they'll never get good at it. So the people that do get good at it there's always going to be like the cream rises to the top. There's always going to be those people that are just so damn good and they work so hard and their product is so good, they're going to be popular. There's always going to be the musical artists that take 99% of the money because they're so popular and they're so good. So even though everyone has a chance, doesn't mean they're going to make it, because it still comes down to you got to do stuff. You have to come up with it and execute it yourself. I mean, even if you're using like new AI technology to create things, you still have to be the one to initiate it. You can't just sit there like thinking things in your brain and they pop up on YouTube. It doesn't work like that. You have to somehow initiate it, and it's so much easier to scroll on your phone and just waste time. And that thing is, that's what most people are going to do. So if you have a little bit of talent and a lot of hard work, you can get to the point where you're making money at these things. And if you're just smart enough to kind of see what's working, see what's not, and I've just kind of developed what I do over time. And it's like I make a little money selling comics, a little money selling books, a little money on YouTube, a little writing screenplays, a little off making the movies, and I kind of juggle the money around, and this thing will pay for this thing, and I take out just enough to pay my rent and my bills. And it's like now I got my little mini empire going, where it's like I've made all this stuff and I'm known for it, and I can come up with things that I want, and other people have joined my team. So anyone, like, I don't have, I think, any talent that any other person could not have or easily develop. And they could probably do it a lot faster than me, because my younger days, I didn't try very hard. I wish I did, but I kind of waited till later in life to even get started. So if you're like super young, it's like just bust your ass on this and kind of start getting stuff out there, and you could make a name for yourself. Because no matter what you do, no matter kind of like what weird shit you're into, there's going to be a lot of people around the world that are like that. In the early days, when you only had one TV channel, it's like whatever was on TV had to appeal to a mass amount of people. So if you're into something different, there's just no TV for you. You got to do something else.
Yeah.
Whereas now, like anything you want, if you're into some sort of weird type of story, there's going to be enough people in the world that if they all pay a tiny bit for it, it's enough to kind of get you some income. Yeah. So you could just have your own little fan base. And that's what people do with their YouTube channels. There's all sorts of crazy things on there that you never would have dreamed of. But it's like, what, 100,000 people watch this video? Like, what the hell's that? So there will be people that will respond to your voice, because like people are sick of just, Hollywood, big budget Hollywood. That is what entertainment is. There's so many people that want something else. Like, I don't want that. I just want something different. I don't even know what it is until I see it. But if you go out and no matter who you are and you make something, whether it's a comic book or a movie, and like, this is my thing, this is my voice, this is the way I see the world, this is my story, and you put it up there, there's going to be people that are like, yes, like, I never thought of this before. I love this. When's the next one? When are you doing part 2? I want another video. And all of a sudden you're like, now I'm onto something. And now you have options. Like, can I make that? Should I make this longer, shorter? Like, should I do this as episodes? And, I have my found footage series, I'm Haunted. Mm-hmm. And I released it as a bunch of like tiny episodes that were released like in real time on YouTube. And I was like, okay, it wasn't that popular. I kind of gave up on it. And then I was like, wait a minute, what if I combined it all together into a movie? So I did that, released it as a movie, and now all of a sudden people on the internet are talking about it because it's there's found footage fans that just love found footage movies. Right. And I don't think it turned out particularly well. I I could have done better at it, but people love it. And all of a sudden I'm making money at it. And it's like, wow, like, so as long as you're smart about it and you just kind of work hard, and then you can, you can make it in this business. There's no one holding you back anymore. Like, it's not the 1940s, it's the 2020s. And and the talent doesn't come down so much to like even like the quality of the effects or anything like that. Those are just kind of side issues. Everyone still loves a great story. And we
Right.
see that in Hollywood, how like they spend hundreds of millions on the absolute best special effects you can imagine. And the movie just bombs because it's boring. No one wants to watch it. It's like, who cares?
Yeah.
Whereas like just some guy talking on YouTube is like a multi-millionaire because he's saying interesting things. So it
Yeah.
doesn't matter. Like, if you're just putting out interesting content and interesting stories done in an interesting way, that's kind of all it takes to kind of make it in this business. And then other people start noticing and they want to jump onto your boat. It's like, I want to be a
Right.
part of that. And all of a sudden, hey, I got these like people that want to help. So you kind of see what resources they have, and then it kind of becomes a team effort. So that's what I like about this business. Is I've just grown relationships with people on my team,
Yeah.
and we kind of figured out what we're good at. And next thing you know, we can make movies. Like, it's such a great feeling.
It's a fascinating time because you could ask somebody, would you rather be in Black Adam, which kind of feels like it fits the criteria of what you just described, a very, very big budget movie that was hard to get into The Rock's character. Like, there wasn't anything there that seemed super interesting or juicy. And the movie made a ton of money, but didn't probably make the money it wanted to make. Or you could be like Thomas Flight on YouTube, who has just under or just at 700,000 subscribers, makes a ton of money just reviewing great films and talking on YouTube. And he probably shoots his entire channel on a Canon 5D. So it's just, we live in this weird time, and not weird, weird's the wrong word, really fascinating, interesting, and inclusive time where, yeah, you find your lane, and then it's on you to market and brand your lane. Brandon, you've been so incredible with your time and your information and knowledge. It's inspiring to see everything you've done. I only have a few more questions, and we can wrap. I wanted to make sure I get in a plug and then just talk to you about The Man in the Box. So this is a novel. It's available, 5-star novel. It's available on Amazon right now. Can you tell us what the novel is about first, and then that process of writing long form descriptive novel style literature versus a comic book or a screenplay?
Yeah, like I started off as a screenplay I wrote, and I ended up shooting a trailer for it. It's kind of like half trailer, half short film thing. And it turned out fairly well, but it's just another project I have that one day I'll eventually make. But I always liked the story. A lot of people like that story. So I was like, well, how could I get the story out there? And I was like, what if I turn it into a book? It was kind of my second novel. Basically, my first one was I'm Haunted, that I kind of just turned the movie, the web series, into a book. But Man in the Box is basically the first one I wrote as an actual novel. And it's about a woman who's like, her husband dies and she wants to reach him from beyond the grave. So she finds they're kind of real, like quote unquote real things. Yeah, I think you can find them on like Amazon, but they're like ghost boxes that's supposed to allow you to speak to the ghosts.
Yeah.
Using like radio waves. I'm assuming they don't really work because that's impossible. But in the book, basically, she's trying to buys one of these things, tries to reach her husband, can't find him, but she ends up contacting some sort of entity. Turns out to be like a demon, basically. But she basically forms a friendship with it. She's really lonely. And at first it's super cool. They become friends and it's like helping her. And then just more and more, it kind of starts taking over her life until the point where it's like she ends up like killing someone and it helps her cover it up.
Oh, man.
But then she has to do like another murder to cover up that first one. And then all of a sudden it's like everything gets out of control. So it was fun. I actually really like that. I want to write another novel soon. I liked not being confined, like with a script.
You got a lot going on, man.
Yeah.
I don't know how you're going to write a novel.
Yeah. I just sat down, I pounded it out, and it changed a lot from the movie, really expanded on it. It's still a very short book, but it's gotten, fairly good. People seem to like it. I got one pretty bad review on online where the guys like said I should stick to screenwriting,
Oh,
because he said there's not enough detail.
stay in
That's the
your
thing, is a lot
lane,
of books I
Brandon.
read,
Stay in
I
your
hate, like,
lane.
yeah, yeah, I don't like books that have insane amount of detail, right? Like, it's
Yeah.
like, get to the point, just tell the
Yeah.
interesting thing. I don't want to hear like a whole page on what the person's wearing. It's
Yeah.
like, just get the,
A lot of
so that's what I
descriptive
did, right? I just got to the
exposition.
point. Yeah,
Yeah.
like all that stuff is just boring. Get to the story. So that's what I did, is like right to the story. And apparently that pissed some people off. But yeah, the book, it was fun. It was fun to do that. And I'm almost thinking of writing that as a TV series. It just seems like it should be a series. A lot of people I know are selling TV pilots and selling series. And it's like, oh shit, if they can do it, I can do it. So I might turn that one into like some sort of, I don't know how many episodes, but 12, 6 or whatever. I got to look into it and figure out how to write a TV series, and I'll do that and then try to sell it.
Perfect. That's beautiful, man. This has been as fun as I thought it was going to be. I learned a ton, and you're an endless well of knowledge. For those listening, can you tell them where they can find you on social media, on the internet, and maybe even see Grotesque or some of your other work?
Yeah, I'm on like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram under my name, Brandon Rhiness.
That's
And Higher Universe is my company.
Rhiness, by the way.
Yeah, Rhiness. Yep.
Mhm.
And Higher Universe is my company. Higher Universe Comics and Higher Universe Pictures are my comics and movies. So if you Google that, I have a YouTube channel that has all my stuff on it. And yeah, if you go to Tubi, you can find Grotesque on there. And it's also on Amazon. And Hotbox is on there too. I'm not sure if it's on Tubi or not, but if you look for Hotbox, you can find it. But yeah, go watch Grotesque. It's great. You're probably gonna love it. And we're starting Grotesque 2. We start shooting June 2nd, so that'll be out probably early 2024. But keep your eye out for that too.
That's amazing. And we'll end on this, Brandon.
Yeah.
If you could have a mentorship dinner with Tony Robbins or Mark Cuban, and you can only choose one, which do you pick?
Ooh, I'd probably go Tony Robbins. I just think he'd be more fun to talk to, a bit more positive.
So, that's interesting, because I thought that Mark Cuban would be more interesting to talk to, and Tony Robbins would be more positive, like you said. Like, he'd be more positive, inspiring, and he would probably have the background to give me the solutions I needed. Whereas Mark Cuban would be really interesting. We could read his Instagram DMs together. We could like talk about like inside stories at the Dallas Mavericks. We could ask and sort of discuss how Adam Silver stays so pale. Like we could like ask these questions that are like burning sort of pop culture questions while we get drunk together.
So I'm not a sports fan, so that wouldn't interest me so much. Like, I'd be interested in Mark Cuban's like business knowledge.
Yeah, that too.
But Tony Robbins would have business knowledge too. So it's like it'd be a toss up. I'd like to invite them both if I could.
Absolutely, and here and for this audience, please do go seek out Brandon Rhiness, the hardest working man in indie film. And if not, show me someone that's working harder. You heard all the places where you can go check out him and his work, including Tubi, where you can go see his new film, Grotesque. He's got Grotesque 2 already on the way. And in his words, if they can do it, you can do it. So don't forget that. Go out, have some discipline, because discipline is the balancer, the thing that evens this whole thing out. If you can have some discipline and ambition, it levels the playing field for you. If you want to know more about Bonsai, Creative, and of course this podcast, the Make It podcast, that's easy. Just go to www.bonsai.film, or you can search for Make It on any of the socials, or you can search for Bonsai Creative at Facebook and TikTok, and you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at _ that's right, _ Bonsai Creative, because there's a sweet British gentleman that owns Bonsai Creative, and one day he'll pass away and give that to us. No, I kid. So until next time, take care of yourselves. And Brandon, I hope to talk to you soon. I hope it's not 2 more years.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I hope they'll be on with, say, 1 year.
Yep, absolutely. Talk to you soon, and best of luck with Growth Test 2.
Thank you.
All right. Be good, man.
Bye.
Bye.